Inshallah, I wanted to do, I was thinking about it as well. And you should have a bit of practice of certain topics that we cover. Maybe I could give you some questions while you can go home. Because a lot of the time we read certain books and we've read the whole book, we still don't have a clue what's going on. And that's from my experience with generally with the whole course, but still, when they have any questions, they message me and I'm like, we've done the last lesson. But it's not that they haven't been paying attention, it's sometimes applying certain information, it doesn't cross your mind in how to apply the information as well. So inshallah, I will be giving questions out as well from next lesson, inshallah. So it's going to be simple questions which I want you to go home and they're going to be from the book, so what we've done so far. Just try to find them. Right, so then the next lesson we'll start with a bit of discussion on the questions, what you found, what's your research saying, inshallah. That makes it more interactive, so it brings a bit more life to the class. Generally, fiqh is, if you don't have a passion for studying, fiqh is a dead boring subject for most people, because if you don't apply in our life, that's right. But we'll do that for all three books, inshallah. All three topics. Okay, Bismillah, page number 35 on the Aqidah section, inshallah. Ascent to Felicity. Yeah. Check it. If you want to buy a book, there might be 1 or 2 copies left, I think. It's £10. They're available. Just have a look, inshallah. If not, you can get some on the weekend. Okay, Bismillah. So last lesson we started on page number 33 was about the maqam and the rank of prophets, companions and the saints, the awliya, the friends of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So now on page number 35, they're talking about the Khulafa Rashideen, al-Mahdiyyin, the 4 rightly guided Khulafa. And so he mentions here, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, we believe that Abu Bakr Siddiq radiyallahu anhu is the best of people after the prophets. So this is one of the Aqidah of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah. أفضل البشر بعد الأنبياء. The best of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's creation after the prophets, after all the prophets. So this includes the followers of Musa alayhi salam, Ibrahim alayhi salam, all the prophets of Allah, right? Including the whole of mankind generally after prophets. The best person to walk on this face of the earth is Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq radiyallahu anhu. This should be our aqidah, this should be our belief. Yeah? So the best person to walk on the face of the earth after prophets is Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq radiyallahu anhu. Followed by Hazrat Umar radiyallahu anhu. And anyone who denies the khilafah is when the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam passed on from this world onto the next. What happened was, obviously there had to be another person in charge, and that person was already chosen by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam as Abu Bakr Siddiq. So all the Muslims followed and they pledged allegiance to Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq radiyallahu anhu. After he passed, then Hazrat Umar radiyallahu anhu, then after him Hazrat Osman, and then after him Hazrat Ali radiyallahu anhu. These were the 4 main leaders of the Muslims. That's what a Khalifa is. Okay, so the main person who all the people followed and they agreed to that person to be the leader of the Muslims. So this should be our understanding and our belief as Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah. The first was Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq radiyallahu anhu. The second Hazrat Umar. And it says here, indeed all of these companions were in agreement regarding the Khilafah of both of these. Thus, whoever denies the Khilafah has committed disbelief. So whoever rejects Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq radiyallahu anhu to be the Khalifa, right, and say he's wrong, he should not be the leader of the Muslims. And this is like a Shia belief, who believe that Hazrat Ali radiallahu anhu, it was his right to be the leader. And Hazrat Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, he wronged him. Whilst Hazrat Ali was busy, he was the relative of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, while he was busy with the preparation of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's passing and the mu'amalat that happened with the family and all that behind his back in a way, Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu became the leader of the Muslims. This is incorrect understanding. And this is not the understanding of the Ummah in general, and this is a misinterpretation or misunderstanding by the Shias. But anyway, is Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq followed by Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu, and we should not have any dispute these first two. These first two should be fully agreed upon that these are this is the order. Then he said they are followed by, in merit this is Hazrat Uthman radiallahu anhu, the possessor of two lights. Why? What does it mean, the possessor of two lights? He was married to the two daughters of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Ruqayya and Kulthum radiallahu anhuma. So when Hazrat Ruqayya radiallahu anha, she passed away, the first one of the daughters of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then Hazrat Uthman, he married Kulthum. This shows his maqam and rank as well. A father, for example, generally I'm speaking, a father gives his daughter's hand to someone who he thinks is deemed worthy enough. Right? Here the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is giving his first daughter Ruqayya radiallahu anha to Hazrat Uthman. When she passes away radiallahu anha, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is giving his second daughter to Hazrat Uthman radiallahu anha. This shows that his maqam and his rank in the court of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in reality in the court of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then he says, followed by his cousin. So Hazrat Ali was the cousin of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The father of Hazrat Ali was the uncle, the chacha of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Right? So they were first cousins. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's daughter was married to the Prophet's cousin, Hazrat Ali radiallahu anhu. And which daughter? Hazrat Fatima al-Zahra. And she's known as Al-Batul, the chaste, the pure woman. So this is one of the titles, or some of the titles of Hazrat Fatima al-Zahra radiallahu anha. They say the entire community agreed to his worthiness of the imamat, and such the agreement does not exist for other than him. And this is just the two we mentioned about Hazrat Ali radiallahu anhu. But they've already mentioned who's the first two leaders, Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq, followed by Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu. Then they just say, just as for in regards to Hazrat Ali radiallahu anhu, that everyone agreed that he was also one of the leaders of Khulafa, and this is something agreed upon. It's not something, sometimes people go to another extreme, where Shias are saying, for example, it's Hazrat Ali radiallahu anhu, he should have been the leader, he was the most worthy, and then they insult Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq, which is kufr. Right? Because his sahabiyat is proven through the Quran. When the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Hazrat Abu Bakr spent the nights in the cave when they were traveling from Makkah Sharif to Medina Sharif, that is mentioned in the Quran Kareem. So his companionship is proven in the Quran. So denying or insulting Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq is kufr. Right? So because he is a sahabi of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his sahabiyat is proven through the Quran Kareem. And generally, as another side note, sometimes people get these two issues mixed up. Even though Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu, he is the greatest sahabi, the greatest man to walk on the earth after prophets, different sahaba had different qualities, right? So there might be one quality which was found more in one sahabi. So he might have better, you could say, more rank in that one aspect. Right? So it's not that Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu, he was the greatest in every single aspect of humanity in regards to the other Sahaba. Different Sahaba had different specialities, you could say. But overall, Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq had the highest maqam. So you might come across narrations that praise or say certain quality about certain Sahabi, that he's got this and he's the best Sahabi with certain qualities. It doesn't negate that he should be the best Sahabi. No. In that one aspect, he might have the fadilat. In that one aspect, he might have a virtue over the other Sahaba Ikram. Like we know, Hazrat Aisha radiallahu has her own maqam. Hazrat Fatima al-Zahra has her own maqam. And the other companions, they have their own. Hazrat Bilal, every, Sahabis got their own station. But overall, this is our structure. Hazrat Abu Bakr, Hazrat Uthman, Hazrat Umar, then Hazrat Uthman, and then Hazrat Ali radiallahu anhum. So keep that in mind as well. So there can be a certain quality which is more found in one Sahabi. So he says, so these four then they say are the rightly guided khulafa and the upright imams. The Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam bore witness to for 10 companions that they will enter paradise. So the 10 Sahaba who were promised Jannah. Yeah, al-asharatul mubashara. Ashara means 10, Bashara means the one who will be given the glad tidings. Bashara means the glad tidings. So there's 10 companions who were promised Jannah in their lifetime. There's two ways to see this now. One is, they were promised Jannah in their life. Imagine the Prophet ﷺ telling a Sahabi, you're going to Jannah. His guy is passed, right? Now, what was their attitude? If someone said to us, you're 100% going to Jannah, and we know that for a fact, our namaz is gone, our rosé is gone, yeah, this is our attitude, isn't it? I'm passed, don't worry. The Prophet ﷺ said, I'm going to Jannah, we'll abandon it. But these Sahaba, knowing that they're going to Jannah, they upped the game. They worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala more. They became more sincere. They increased the shukr to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because they knew they're going to Jannah. So what did they do? They thanked Allah more. They got another reason to worship Allah more. They got another reason to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whereas for us, it'll be the opposite way around. So we should adopt these habits of the Sahaba Ikram in general. So the first being Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq, Hazrat Umar, Hazrat Uthman, Hazrat Ali, Hazrat Talha, Hazrat Zubayr ibn Awam, Hazrat Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas, Hazrat Sa'id ibn Zayd, Hazrat Abdul Rahman bin Auf, and Hazrat Abu Ubaidah ibn Jarrah. So these are the 10 Sahaba Ikram who were promised Jannah in their lifetime. So normally, so this is another thing that we know, that means they died with Iman. Another thing we know, that they died with acceptance of the quote of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which is the quote of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then he means, who is the loyal trustee of to this nation. Okay, so here they just mentioned in general. It says yeah, their rank is in the same order, followed by the companions. So now they're saying, the rank of the Sahaba Ikram, the categories of Sahaba. And inshallah we'll finish this point and here, then we'll start after namaz, the fiqh aspect. So for Aqidah is important, just keep this in mind. So we had the first 4 Khulafa Rashidin, their rank. Then obviously they're the first 4 from the 10 as well. Then you could say the 10 Sahaba which we just mentioned now, who are promised Jannah, their rank. Then after that is the rank of the Sahaba of Badr, who took part and fought in the battle of Badr. Then after them is the rank of the Sahaba who took part in the battle of Uhud. Right, so these are the different ranks of the Sahaba Ikram. And then those who gave bay'ah at Hudaybiyah, who gave bay'ah to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam at Hudaybiyah, they pledged allegiance to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in Hudaybiyah, and then in general the rest of the Sahaba Ikram. So some Sahaba, they took part in the battles, and they were from the Ashara Mubashara. They were Badri Sahabi, they were from Sahaba who took part in Uhud as well. So they have double rank, and these are when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Muslims needed them most. In the battle of Badr, there were 313 Sahaba only, versus over 1,000 kuffar. Right, so this shows the maqam and the rank of the Sahaba, that they never, left the side of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam through thick and thin. So when we face with challenges, then remember the first 13 years of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's life, when he was in Makkah Sharif, he experienced hardship. The Muslims experienced torture. Some of the Sahaba, their bodies were forked. Forking means when those rakes that they use in the ground, it's the shape of a fork, right? It has those pins. So they rake the ground with it to take the stones out, the body and stuff, right? basically the skins and the body of folk like that. This is Sahaba Ikram, the Qurbaniya they gave for the deen. And today, unfortunately, we can't sacrifice a bit of sleep for namaz, for example. I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants us all the tawfiq to truly ponder about this and try to memorize the information that we've covered so far. So inshallah, I will give you some questions on the previous few topics that we've covered. So it's about 10 pages, not much. If that's 10 pages, probably about 10 pages. But inshallah, next lesson I'll give you some questions first about this, and then we'll continue from matters of faith, which is a very interesting topic as well, inshallah. Smiley, some guys on please. أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Inshallah, we're going to continue from the next part of the book. So there's three different topics that we normally cover in the subject in this lesson. First, this book has two parts. So the first part is about Aqidah, or beliefs regarding general beliefs. It's not at the moment. I will be tackling other controversial issues as well. But at the moment we're just tackling the main core beliefs that any Sunni, whatever sect you're from, whatever whoever you consider yourself, Brahmi, Diabandi, whatever genuine to be a Muslim. So at the moment we're covering those aqa'id. So it's not like bashing anyone yet, but generally it's just a Sunni aqa'id. But the second part of the book is about fiqh, masail, rulings, and then the third part of the session is about Imam Ghazali's beginning of guidance. This is a bit more of the spiritual aspect of the ibadat. One is just like this is farad, this is wajib, this is halal, this is haram. And that's obviously necessary as well. But if you just stick to that basis, then instead of getting closer to Allah, normally people get further from Allah. Why? They start bashing people. You've done this wrong and you've done this, and then fatwas will fly about. But inshallah, moving on to where we continue from. So we've covered so far the main aspects of taharat, which is wudu, ghusl, istinja, and now we're just finishing off the rules regarding women, their impure days throughout the month. So they divided the bleeding that women experience into three parts. One was called haid, the monthly periods, minimum 3 days, maximum 10 days. Second was the nifas, postnatal bleeding, so bleeding after a woman has given birth, and there's no minimum days, but the maximum was 40 days. And then the third, which we're going to discuss now, inshallah, it's about istihada. You could say it's like a dysfunctional bleeding. So it's not the main bleeding that normally a woman experiences, which is from her womb. But this one, third one, is more to do with dysfunctional bleeding. You could say like similar. It has the same rules, like a nosebleed, for example. So Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Top of page 58, inshallah, we'll start from there. So the first two ones should be absolutely clear. That a minimum, so the monthly cycle, I just briefly tell you the main masail regarding the woman. Why it's first thing is necessary for men to know as well, because inshallah you will be husbands and those who are husbands, and women don't really have the means, unfortunately, to go ask an alima, and at the same time, unfortunately, we don't send our daughter to study the deen as well. So obviously, where the alima is going to come from if we haven't sacrificed our daughters. So hence, the men get asked the questions, and then they love to find out. Like, I had a husband come yesterday, the day before yesterday, and he's asking for his wife. Well, obviously now she's not allowed to ask, so sometimes the men have to go and do the job. And secondly, the Quran is for everyone. These rulings are mentioned in the Quran Kareem regarding women, and all these different masail, they're from the Quran. So hence, the ilm is for everyone. And it's not just limited to women only. So for the women, the monthly cycle is minimum 3 days and a maximum 10 days. So it vary, every woman is different. Some might bleed for 5 days, some 7 days, some 9 days. But anything which is above 10, then that's not considered as a monthly cycle. So for example, in January she bleeds 7 days. February 7 days. March is 12 days. That's abnormal. Her routine is what? 7. Right? So 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th and 12th, she will have to do the namaz. She has to go because why? Because it's got over 10. But if you stayed under 10, for example, so there's 3 scenarios. One is her bleeding only 7 days every month, that's standard, right? So she can't pray namaz or anything. One is she's bleeding 7, 7, 7, and then a random month she bleeds 9. Those extra 2 days are still under 10, so that's a 9. So now her new standard will become 9 automatically. So the next month her benchmark is 9, and then as long as it stays under 10. But if it's 7, 7, 7, 7, and then next month it goes to 11 or 12, anything over 10, from 7 till whatever it gone to 15, 10, 9, whatever it is, right? Over 10, whatever it is, then those will be considered that she has to make up those salahs and whatever it is. Because that's become abnormal, anything above the 7. And so that's regarding her monthly cycle. Regarding, and this is where people get confused, is after giving birth. A woman that bleeds after giving birth, then in our Pakistani culture, we have a lot of misunderstanding regarding this. They say 40 days she's impure, she can't read namaz, Charlie Gyare, namaz nahi honi. That is a myth and that is false, and that a lot of people commit haram by missing namaz.
So with 7, 14 months, then it becomes 9 for the 14th. For the 4th month, she doesn't have to make up any further.
No, she don't. So as long as it stays under 10, so if it's 7, 7, 7, and then random month it just comes to 9, because it's still under 10, then 9 is a new benchmark. So next month she'll judge it according to 9. Right? But if it goes over 10, then that's when she has to stop praying in namaz. So imagine a woman's bleeding for 12 days in the month, right? She has to read the namaz. As soon as she realizes it's going over 10, last month it was 7, so the 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, whatever she's bleeding to, she has to make the namaz out. But regarding the after giving birth, right? Minimum, there is no minimum days. Some women only bleed just that same day they give birth. Some for 1 week, some for 2 days, some for 5 days. But the maximum is 40 days. So if you continuously bleed for 40 days after giving birth, first 40 days is like basically a monthly period. She doesn't read namaz. She doesn't have to fast. But the 41st day, namaz, she has to stop. Do ghusl and read namaz. Right? But a lot of people, or women in our culture, and this is a common misconception, they don't read namaz for 40 days. So after 5 days, her bleeding stops. 6th day, namaz is followed straight away. Right? But when she starts reading, what will happen in the family? They do say, "Kya kar rahi hai? Charlie di aare koni rahe. Don't read namaz. Don't read namaz. It's haram. What are you doing?" Right? That's haram. Because now her bleeding will stop. So the maximum days is 40, but there's no minimum. So even after 1 day she stops bleeding, namaz falls straight away. And the ruling for the namaz is, imagine it doesn't have to be the next day. So if she's bleeding at Zohr time, obviously she doesn't read. If Asr time there's no bleeding, and she thinks that it's stopped actually, Asr becomes falls on her straight away. So she does a shower and reads Asr straight away. But and as long as she's got enough time for the shower and Asr. If she's got 5 minutes, obviously she can't read, have a shower. So Maghrib will become farz on her. But her job will be foreign to do ghusl. Third scenario is regarding those extra days now. So either in the normally monthly cycle of 10 plus, or the 40 plus after giving birth. So this is what we're going to discuss now. It said the following cases are considered as the dysfunctional uterine bleeding. The first one I mentioned, any bleeding of a woman giving, okay, so before the child exits the body. Okay, so sometimes, for example, the woman's water burst and then she's gone into labor, and the bleeding might start before the child has exited the body. That is not considered her period or a post-age. If namaz comes, namaz is farz. Even if a woman is in labor, namaz is still farz on her. A lot of people, they bunk namaz because they think bimar hogi janani, right? That doesn't count. You know, in our culture, a polite way to say, and it's rude and disrespectful generally to talk about these things in public, like in front of your parents and stuff like that. But so in our Pakistani culture, they say that the woman is bimar, she's ill. If they say that, that means she can't pray namaz because she's going through a monthly cycle. Don't say, what do you mean she's ill, she's watching TV or she's doing this. This happens sometimes, you know, people have a jazba of the deen and they say namaz is far away, it means she's ill. She's, you know, okay to go to chill in town, she's okay to do this. But that's a polite way in our culture to say that she can't pray namaz. They might say she's ill. So take that as a words of wisdom and don't get caught up, because I know someone tried to pop up beef in the family, namaz is far as what you missed that, and then basically they had to tell me straight up, and he's like, oh, sorry about this. Yeah? So just keep it in mind, that happens. So they use bimar in our culture and she's ill or something. So before the child exits the body, any bleeding that occurs, she still has to read namaz. Second is bleeding after childbirth, but the ones like 41st day, 42nd, 40, those extra 40, more than 40 days. And then her normal monthly cycle, like I mentioned, that she might have 7, 7, 7, and then randomly she's gone to 12 the next month. So 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, she has to, that's the same rule for these. We can tell you the rule afterwards what to do. And then the last one is any bleeding of a girl who's not baligh. So like this, you know, 5-year-old child might start experiencing it and so on. So that'll be considered, that won't be considered her monthly cycle and stuff like that. So now they're saying, what's the rule for these? So normal for monthly cycle and after giving birth, she can't read namaz, she can't, you know, read the Quran, she can't enter the masjid. There's a full list that we done on the previous page. She can't have marital relation to the husband, it becomes haram to have a physical relationship. The husband even touching from the knees to the navel, skin to skin contact, it becomes haram as well. Yeah, so when a woman's on a monthly cycle. And then he mentions touching a copy of the Quran without any, like, for example, if someone had a parda or something. Imagine I use my hat, right? So imagine, I'm not wearing this, and it's not attached to me, it's not attached to the Quran. So then you can't touch the Quran like this. Right? If you don't have wuzu, if you like a woman who's on her monthly cycle or whatever. But if it's part of the Quran, like, you know, the khilaf of the Quran, people have like a case for the Quran, that's considered part of the Quran. Even though you normally remove it, take it out and read it, but when you put it away, what you do, you put the Quran back in, don't you? So automatically that's considered touching the Quran, even if it's got that thing on top of it. And so it has to be something detached from the Quran, and detached from yourself. So if you're wearing it like this, and you do it like this, the ulama mention is makruh. Even though it won't be haram on that level to touch the Quran without wuzu, but it's still makruh to do it because you're wearing it. You know, someone might grab the kameez that day. Right? So it has to be something you're not wearing, and it's not attached to the Quran. So anything, but it counts as anything. Even if you have a jacket lying about, you can, if it's clean, you pick the jacket, Quran up in the jacket and put it on the shelf like that, you can do that. So these things were generally not permissible whilst a woman's on her monthly cycle. So now they're mentioning that, what about these extra days that are not included? What's the rule regarding these? It says here, the rule of these is same rule as a nosebleed. So generally, if you have a nosebleed, your wuzu breaks. But what if you have a nosebleed all day long? Or you've got a cut on your hand, you know, you sliced your finger, trying to be a chef, and then you cut your finger instead, right? So now the blood is not stopping. So now what will be the ruling for our general wuzu? So it will be the same ruling that we're going to mention here now. So it says it does not prevent a person from namaz, so you still have to do namaz. It doesn't prevent a person from fasting, you still have to fast. And marital relationships are still allowed, even though in these extra days she might still be bleeding, it still is halal and permissible to have marital relationships. So after 10 days, or after the monthly cycle, or after 40 days after normal, after giving birth basically. So these things will become permissible. Even her tawaf around the Kaaba. So when a woman goes on Hajj, for example, if she starts a monthly cycle, she can't do tawaf around the Kaaba, hence they just, you know, they can't enter the masjid as well. So then they just sit outside in the courtyard of the masjid or and they just wander and do zikr and things like that. So he said, if such bleeding continues for the duration of an entire prayer time, so this is general rule now, and nosebleed, any cut you have, it could be another problem, like some people have a wind problem, that they do wuzu and they pass wind, they do wuzu, they pass wind, they can, because they might have an upset stomach. So now the ruling is the same for all these people, right? So he says here, that thing has to happen in the complete prayer time. Then the woman must perform wudu at the beginning. They're talking about the woman here, but this is a general rule. You can mention on the next page anyway, in more detail. It says, then the woman must perform wudu at the beginning of the prayer time, just like someone who has a normal problem, like constant diarrhea, constant gas release, continuous nosebleed, and so on. Then there's 3 conditions that are mentioned on page 59. It says, there are 3 conditions for people with these excuses. It's called a chronic excuse. So you have the excuse, the condition of establishing the excuse, the condition of continuing, and the condition of termination. And inshallah we'll do these 3 points and then we'll stop on this aspect. So the first one is, so this is applied to a nosebleed, passing wind, constant toilet problem, whatever it is that's causing you to break your wuzu again and again. You do the wuzu, it breaks, you do the wuzu, it breaks. So obviously people experience different problems at different times. First thing is that the condition of establishing the excuse, as stated above, is for the excuse to continue the duration of the entire prayer time, such that the person is unable to do wudu and pray without the occurrence of the excuse. Afterwards, the person is considered chronically excused. Therefore, he may pray at any amount of fard or wajib or nafar or prayers after having performed the wudu with it, i.e. the excuse, despite the occurrence of the excuse after the wudu. The wudu performed in such a state is invalidated only by the expiration of prayer time. So now what does this mean? It seems long-winded. So this means that, for example, I'll give you a nosebleed example. The person has a nosebleed. Zohr started at 12 o'clock, his nose started bleeding. Now he done wuzu, he's about to do namaz, or he starts bleeding again. Then he goes to do wuzu again, he starts bleeding. Now it's bleeding continuously. He said, I'll wait 10 minutes, I'll wait 20 minutes. Especially in the winter time, you only have like a 2-hour window, 1.5 hour window, right, to read the namaz. So now he said, I'll wait 10 minutes, my nose bleed might stop. But he sits down on the sofa, it's still bleeding. Each time he checks, it's still bleeding, it's still bleeding, it's still bleeding. Now, Zohr started at 12, it's finishing at 2. It's 1:45, it's still bleeding. So all the way through, he hasn't had enough time to do wuzu and read his farz. Yeah, he should have that, at least that time. So I'm just saying, 4 minutes of wudu, 4 minutes of farz, so about 7-8 minutes, right? So average, he should have at least 7-8 minutes where it didn't happen. So that you can judge it according to that. So if it's happening within every 5 minutes, obviously I can't do wuzu or read namaz. So you have to wait. So if that happens all the way through the prayer time, such that the prayer time is about to finish now, then obviously the person, now he's got 10 minutes left, so obviously he has to read the namaz. So he does the wuzu, reads the namaz. Now he's considered a person with a bimari. I'll use the word bimari or illness, it makes it easier for you. So that person, now he's got the excuse, now he's qualified, right? So what he does is, 2 o'clock Asr started. He does wuzu at the start of Asr. Even if his nose is bleeding, doesn't matter. He can pray what he wants, read the Quran, do tawaf around the Kaaba. As long as between Asr and Maghrib, even if the nosebleed happened once, right? So in the first prayer time, it happened throughout the whole thing. At the end of the prayer time, he's qualified now, as a person with a valid excuse. Now from Asr to Maghrib, he has to do the fresh wuzu to start Asr. Now from Asr to Maghrib, he can read what he wants, touch the Quran, whatever he wants. As long as the bimari happened once in the prayer time. So you might have a nosebleed once between Asr and Maghrib. Then from Maghrib, soon as Maghrib starts, his wuzu breaks. That's the rule. So the start of the next namaz cancels out the wuzu. Right? So now Maghrib has started, his wuzu breaks. Soon as he hits, say 4 o'clock wuzu, Maghrib starts. Soon as he hits 4, wuzu is gone. Even though he had a nosebleed or did that. Now he does fresh wuzu for Maghrib. Between Maghrib and say Isha was 6, right? So 4 to 6, he has to have the problem once. Right? Then, soon as Asr hit, Isha starts at 6 o'clock, then his wuzu breaks automatically. And now from Isha to Fajr, imagine it doesn't happen. If it doesn't happen for one complete prayer time, then you consider a person who's fine now. Then you have to, from Fajr till, so you have to wait a complete prayer time to have the excuse. So sometimes, people, they might have a wind problem, right? And they can't keep the wuzu. So what they do is, they say, oh, wuzu doesn't stay. And then they don't wait one full prayer time. And then, start making excuses, calling my wuzu nikalna. They start praying namaz without wuzu. So the illness has to occur for one complete prayer time. Thereafter, at least once in that prayer time. So in Asr time at least once, then Maghrib time at least once, then Isha time at least once. If a prayer time happens and the bimari didn't happen, might be a wind problem, might be a nosebleed, whatever it is, right? Then you have to go back to stage 1. Wait to a full prayer time. If it happens in the full prayer time, then you excuse again, and then you work forward like that. So that's the same ruling for a woman. So if she's bleeding, just say 10 days, and the 11th day, it might happen all the way through one namaz time. Then the next namaz time, it might just happen once. But what will she do? She'll do just fresh wuzu at the start of every namaz. But this is only for that one illness you have. Imagine you have the nosebleed. This is the rule only for the nosebleed because you can't stop that. Same way you cut your finger, you can't stop it. Automatically it's bleeding. You put the plaster on, it still flows out. You might not have access to a plaster, maybe you just put a needle on it, and then it's bleeding again. Same problem you're having, right? But if there's another reason that breaks the wuzu, then it breaks anyway. So for example, the guy who had the nosebleed, and I said even if the nosebleed happens in the next following prayer times, he carries on praying, he carries on reading namaz, reading Quran. It's fine because he's excused for his nosebleed. But now if he's past wind, obviously his wuzu is broken. So all the other things still apply. It's just the one bimari the person has, they're excused for that one illness. So the women will be excused for any days, any times above 10 days or 40 days. That's one condition, how to become qualified. The second one is the condition to continue it, which I mentioned. It has to happen at least once in every prayer time. And then the last one, when does it end? When it doesn't happen in the prayer time. So all three I've mentioned, all three scenarios. So this is for any, sometimes it might be harder to have circumstances, like for example, you got to work, you got half an hour break, and the next minute, your gums bleeding, for example, and you try to do wudu, it doesn't happen, you're still bleeding, you try to do wudu, now breaks over. And sometimes we find ourselves in a tricky situation, the namaz is still false. So you might think, time's up, my blood is not stopping, I can't wait the full namaz time. So forget it, I'll miss the namaz, I'll check the next namaz time. You still have to pray the namaz, do not to miss that namaz. I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants us all the tawfiq, inshallah, to understand that masala, inshallah. If you have any questions, you're free to ask any questions as well. Inshallah. So
everything all right?
ठीक है इंशाल्लाह.
Oh, मैं खुली रहने दे.
तो फ्रंट वाली खुली रहने दो बात please.
एक के लॉक लग गई है. बाकी everything all right.
ठीक है इंशाल्लाह.
Like आप खाना लेकर तो phone होगा.
It's good to be a person of principle. This is what I learned from my high self. His duty, what he considers his duty, is not bound by it, but what he considers his duty to lock up the masjid and make sure it's safe. Sometimes, if the masjid is full inside, if he knows he has to lock up after Isha, he locks the door and he goes. People go out, they like the door's locked. And so a person of principle, he sticks to his guns. At least he can go home, sleep that. At least I never left it open if something happens. So that's what I like about him. So he just confirmed that I've done my job. If you leave it open, it's your fault. Yeah? So guys, don't leave anything open. Otherwise it's my fault. So Bismillah, next part inshallah, move on to Imam al-Ghazali's work. So last thing we stopped on was, so Imam Ghazali is taking us through a journey of the adab and the spiritual side. So this is the fixed side that we covered, do this, don't do that. it requires a bit of effort to memorize. But the next Imam Ghazali is just taking us on a spiritual journey, and he's talking about the wudu. From my understanding on page, I did skip a bit, the wudu one which I'm going to summarize now, but we're going to start from the bottom on page number 34. But I don't know where we stopped on before, but we'll start at the bottom of 34 inshallah. The previous 1 2 pages is about wudu. I did mention in the fiqh lesson about the du'as that we're supposed to read with each part of wudu, which is at the back of this book if you want to memorize the du'as. And I think it's very beneficial that we memorize the du'as because it's more of a spiritual journey through our wudu. And these du'as are on page number 185 if you've got this book and the other book. So the du'as for wudu, I'll just briefly summarize. Imam Ghazali mentioned the same thing as well. It's just a different aspect of doing the wudu as well. So normally, we think it's namaz time in 10 minutes, quickly we just jump in the bathroom, wash our face, wash our hands, churuti one time, and then leg into masjid. But the actual ibadat of wudu or the salah itself, it starts when you get off your sofa. So you're chilling with the boys, you're chilling out, you think, let's go boys, let's go to the mosque, read namaz. So wherever you're driving, you just say, I don't know, we're driving, you leave your road, and then you think, let's go to the masjid. Soon as you made the intention and you turn your car towards the masjid, your ibadat has started then. Yeah, so if you're going for Isha Salah, whatever it is, your actual worship has started then. You're sitting on the sofa, I'm going, let's get up to read namaz. The moment you get up from your sofa, that's when your ajr and reward for that namaz has started because you made the intention, and each step that you take will be considered as ibadat. So now Imam Ghazali mentioned here as well, the du'as that we recite once we're doing the wudu. So the wudu normally we consider in the fiqh aspect, it's just a way we qualify to read namaz. But Imam Ghazali is saying that the wudu itself is the ibadat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? Because when you do wudu, then you should be conscious that why you're doing wudu in the first place. Right? So why are we doing wudu in the first place? Because Allah has given us the hukam in the Quran, is that when you recite the Quran or when you read فَاغْسِلُوا وُجُوهَكُمْ وَأَيْدِيَكُمْ إِلَى الْمَرَافِقِ وَامْسَحُوا بِرُؤُوسِكُمْ وَأَرْجُلَكُمْ إِلَى الْكَعْبَيْنِ. That wash your face, wash your arms, wipe your hair and wash your feet. This is something Allah has told us in the Quran. So when you do the wudu, the ibadat has already started. So he says that when you wash your mouth, for example, the ones in this book are easier to memorize. So if you got good memory and you got the stamina to do it, then memorize it from Imam Ghazali's book. If not, then stick to this book. It's got a nice, short, powerful dua as well. So the first one is, when you're rinsing your mouth, you say, Allahumma inni ala tilawati al-Quran wa dhikrika wa shukrika wa husni ibadatik. The first one, oh Allah, help me ala tilawati al-Quran. When you're rinsing your mouth, you make this dua. Oh Allah, give me the ability and help me to recite the Quran. And then, wa dhikrika, and do your dhikr. Wa shukrika, and do your shukr. And wa husni ibadatik, and worship you in a beautiful manner. So when you're rinsing our mouth, we do this dua of asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to purify our mouth and our tongue. Then when we're rinsing our nose, Bismillah, Allahumma arihni ra'ihat al-jannah wa la turihni ra'ihat al-nar. Oh Allah, help us to smell the fragrance, or help me to smell the fragrance of Jannah and not the odors of the hellfire. So it's like a spiritual thing that you're doing. It's not only just a formality that we do when we do wudu. Third, Bismillah, Allahumma bayyid wajhi yawma tabyaddu wujuh wa taswaddu wujuh. Oh Allah, whiten my face the day faces will be black and white. On Yawm al-Qiyamah, those people who disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, their faces will be dark and gloomy on Yawm al-Qiyamah. And the people who do the wudu and worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, there will be a ghurr al-muhajjal. He described him as a ghurr al-muhajjal. Ghurr al-muhajjal is the horse with, he has a white, like a part on his forehead. Black horse, imagine, with a white streak on his forehead or on his face, and the 4 feet, only the 4 feet are white of the horse. The Muslims will be like that on Yawm al-Qiyamah. Why? Because if they done wudu and read the namaz, they are about the limbs of wudu, so the face, 2 hands and the feet basically, they're going to be shining. So from amongst the crowd you can tell the people of Salah. Why? Because their face, arms and feet are going to be shining. So the Prophet ﷺ said, the believers will be like a ghurr muhajjal, that's a type of horse that is black with a white forehead and white feet. All 4 feet are white. So it says here, when you wash your face, you make the dua, oh Allah, whiten my face, the face will be black and white. Then when you're washing your right arm, Bismillah, Allahumma a'tini kitabi biyamini wa hasibni hisabin yasira. Oh Allah, give me my book of deeds in my right hand on Yawm al-Qiyamah. You know, people are going to be given the book of deeds in the right hand and the left hand. Those who are good actions, they're going to get it in the right hand. Those who disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they're going to get the book in the left hand, sticking out the back. That's why the dua for the left hand is Bismillah, Allahumma la tu'tini kitabi bishimali wa la min wara'a dhahri. Oh Allah, don't give me my book of deeds in my left hand, and sticking out my back on Yawm al-Qiyamah. That's when you wash your left hand. Then when you do masa of your head, we know there's 7 groups of people who are going to be given the shade under the throne of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on Yawm al-Qiyamah. I'll leave that discussion of hadith for next time. But there will be a group of 7 people who will get the shade on Yawm al-Qiyamah. And it says, so when you do masa of the head, it will be Bismillah, Allahumma adhilla min tahta dhilla arshika yawma la dhilla illa dhillu arshik. The Allah, give me the shade under your throne, under your arsh, the day there's no shade but your shade. Yeah, so this is when you do masa, and look at the, the beauty of the buzz that you're going to get when you do wudu itself. Normally when you do wudu, one time again, yeah. But now, even though we still get some reward for the wudu itself, but as soon as you start considering the wudu the ibadat, that's when your namaz is going to have a different lutf and andaaz to him. That's when we're going to feel the buzz of the namaz. Why? Because the preparation for the namaz, and when worldly affairs, worldly occasions, the Ashad is happening just on, 1st of December. Now it's near the end of September. We're already preparing, we're ready 6 months, even the year before we book the wedding hall, the weekend's going to get taken, it's a busy weekend, you start booking the weekends, everything you prepare beforehand. But when it comes for namaz, we get on the musalla, we're like, oh, never mind, Allah. We're so last minute with our ibadat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But we should be the way we are with worldly affairs. Try to be on time, try to be punctual. At the same time, whatever preparation they're doing, consider that part of your namaz as well. Then when you do the wudu, Allahumma inni ala tilawati al-Quran wa dhikrika wa shukrika wa husni ibadatik. Allahumma rihni raihat al-jannah wa la turihni raihat al-nar. Now you're thinking about Qiyamah, you're thinking about the Day of Judgment. Allahumma bayyid wajhi yawma tabyaddu wujuh. Now you're going to feel the buzz of doing the wuzu as well. Yeah? And just as a fiqh aspect, if your toilet's there, then you shouldn't be doing dhikr in that kind of bathroom. So in the masjid one, because the toilet cubicles are separate, you can't do it loud. But at home, if the toilet is right next to you, then the other is, just think of the du'as. You don't need to verbally say them. Allah knows what's in our hearts and in our minds. So you can just think about those du'as. And then the next one was mentioned when you do masa of the ears. Bismillahi Allahumma ja'alni min alladhina yastami'un al-qawla fayattabi'un ahsana. I think this is something we all need to focus more on, even myself. And this is Allahumma ja'alni min alladhina yastami'un al-qawla. Allah, make us from those who listen to the speech and follow the best advice. And so no names mentioned, some of these guys know anyway. One of the boys in class, someone dropped the Quran today. And it really hurt me that this really sad state that we find ourselves in as a Muslim Ummah, right? And one of the boys in class dropped the Quran, he picked it up naturally and he put it down. And the other guy goes, it's not his fault, it's the exposure we have on social media. He said that, oh, you don't need to do that. So that was a bit ajib and strange to me. So I said to him, why? He said, the guy on TikTok told me. Yes, I'm already on TikTok. Yeah, this is where if someone tells us anything, this is something important to keep in mind. Any person who, I don't know if you call him a sheikh, mufti, peer, whatever he calls himself. Anyone who tells you that it's fine, you don't have to apply the adab of the Quran adab towards the Prophet ﷺ, adab towards the Kaaba, for example, then you need to leave that sheikh, you need to leave that teacher, you need to leave that person. Why? Because our iman is about adab as well. Our acceptance in the court of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not only about this halal and haram, do and don't. It's not a robotic religion. It's a religion of adab as well. So any ulama of the past, if they saw a teacher even spit on the street randomly, spit in the direction of the Kaaba, they'll say, I don't want to study this guy's kind of adab. This is the rank of our scholars of the past. Hence they became Imam Shafi. Hence they became Imam Malik. Now people say, I'm going to Madina Sharif, I'm not wearing my shoes. Because Imam Malik didn't do this. I'm not, Imam Malik, he never, look at the adab, right? He never broke his wudu inside Madina Sharif. This is the adab. When he wanted to go to the toilet and relieve himself, he would go outside of Madina Sharif, even though there's no Quran or Hadith that says this. Why? This is the ishq. And that's what we say, the great Imam Malik. Anyone, Sunni, Shia, Wahabi, Brahmi, whatever you want to call them, everyone has adab for Imam Malik, right? Why? Because of his adab for Quran, his adab for the Kaaba. Like our elders have said, don't put your back towards the Quran, right? And these so-called YouTubers and these TikTok guys, they're like, there's no way the Quran says don't put your back. There isn't. I'm telling you, there isn't as well. There's no way in the hadith, there isn't. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes the people who reject the Quran. Don't become like those. وَرَاءَ كِتَابَ اللَّهِ مِنْ وَرَاءَ ظَهْرِ. They threw the book of Allah behind the back. Right? The Hafiz, one of these youngsters by now, the Hifz. وَلَمَّا جَاءَهُمْ رَسُولٌ مِنْ عِنْدِ اللَّهِ. When a prophet came from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what did they do? كِتَابُ اللَّهِ مِنْ وَرَاءَ ظَهْرِ. They threw the book of Allah behind the back. Allah gives this example in the Quran, i.e. they rejected the Quran. So the ulama say that people who reject the Quran, Allah gives the example as they threw the book of Allah behind the back. So now turning your back towards the Qibla, the Quran when it's on the desk, even though it doesn't clear cut say don't put your back towards the Quran. It doesn't say don't put your back towards don't put your feet towards the Qibla. But this is where the ulama of scholars who read between the lines, this is where these young Dawa, I don't want to say man, Dawa man, everyone knows who he is, right? Dawa kid, when they give Dawa and they say this is okay, this is okay, this is okay, is because they haven't sat with true ulama. They just sat with TikTokers and unfortunately they take the deen from there. So these du'as Imam Ghazali is teaching that is part of the adab of doing wudu. And so you get the spiritual journey and spiritual connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through ayah wudu as well. So that is on page number 185 if you want to memorize those. So going back to Imam Ghazali's work, inshallah, just briefly touching upon this part. So he mentioned all the different things that you should read. And then you finish off with the dua, i.e. the second kalima, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. You finish your second the wudu with second kalima, and then ayah from the Quran, Allahumma ja'alni min al-tawwabin wa ja'alni min al-mutatahhirin. Oh Allah, make me from the people of Tawbah and those people who are mutatahhirin, the pure ones. So this is what the dua you read after doing your wudu. And like I mentioned previously, sometimes it's a bit hard. Our Arabic might be a bit rusty. We might take this ambition to learn this, right? At least read the Arabic English translation and have that in your mind. Come as come, right? Or when you're washing your face, for example, learning the Arabic might be hard. You might learn the Arabic and forget what it means, right? So at least have in your mind, oh Allah, make my face white, the day facing me black and white. Oh Allah, give me my book in the right hand of the day. People can get it in the left hand. Just keep memorize the English, for example. At least Allah is not bound by language. Allah is not bound by our thoughts and imagination. He won't know what we're thinking and what we understand. So keep these things in mind. So then he mentions that his ablution will be stamped with a seal of approval and will be ascended to beneath the throne. Then where it will stay glorifying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The reward of this will continue to be written for him until the day of judgment. So he mentions here, فَلَا يَزَالُ يُسَبِّحُ اللَّهَ تَعَالَى وَيُقَدِّسُهُ وَيُكْتَمُ لَهُ ثَوَابُ ذَلِكَ إِلَى يَوْمِ الْقِيَامَةِ. So why? Because he's done the wudu with ikhlas and sincerity. That's what Imam Ghazali is trying to, he's telling us here. And that when wudu is done from the heart, then the whole worship, the lutf and the blessing of the whole ibadah changes. Right? That's why we read so much namaz and still Allah says in the Quran Kareem, you read your namaz and you leave bad actions. We read 50 years and you still can't stop backbiting. Why? Because when you've done the wudu, we were present. You did the namaz, and if you've got a shop, for example, our brains in the shop wonder what's happening, if the guys are working properly. If you do any other job, we're thinking about that. We're halfway through, watching whatever game it is, a football match these days, unfortunately, right? So who's winning? And all the way through the namaz, we're thinking about one day if they scored enough, one day, what's the level was. Whatever is what we're interested in, right? People are interested in different things. I don't really watch TV, so I don't really know. I just try to make the stories up while I hear from youngsters. Yeah, but it's mostly about football and cricket and I don't know, Pakistan and this and that. But whatever it is, whatever you guys are interested in. But then he says, there are 7 things you must avoid in wudu, and then inshallah we'll finish after this. There's one paragraph left. It said there are 7 things that you must avoid in your wudu. First, do not shake your hands in a way that will make the water splash. Sometimes people do this, right? And this is makruh to do that. So you don't shake up your hand. This is generally as well. Sometimes people wash their hands at the sink and they do this. It's makruh to do that. But one of the wisdom God mentioned about wudu is when you're washing your body parts for wudu, your gunah is getting washed as well. Right? Your minor sins are being washed away when you do wudu. So that water carries that impurity. Now you're splashing the water all over the place. So it is a makruh to do that. Second is, do not strike your face when you do wudu. Generally it's haram to hit the face in the first place. So boxing is haram. So sometimes some people try to legalize it. It's a sport, good for fitness. There's enough other ways to stay fit as well. But punching in the face, generally training for boxing is fine. Having a sparring match without boxing someone's face, it's allowed. But the punching anyone in the face, even your own children, for tarbiyat is haram to hit anyone in the face. So here they mention just striking your face. People will be excited to do wudu, especially avoid trying to wudu in public places, because the guy sitting next to you does half your wudu for you. You're like, and they do this, and the water's splashing all over the place, right? So it's makruh to do that in the first place. One thing, the water's going all over the place. Second is splashing the water on the face is not allowed. Third, to indulge in the worldly talk. And this is also makruh, to talk about anything other than something. Sometimes something necessary might come up that you need to, like for example, two people are doing wudu and the third tap's open and the guy can just close that tap. That's perfectly fine. But now, you're doing wudu and you're like, yeah, bro, you've been a long time, I didn't see you, man. Yeah, you should come down. That's not allowed. Having just a casual conversation is not allowed. It said, and do not wash any limb more than 3 times. And we mentioned this in Imam Ghazali mentioned as well, because it's against the adab of the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Washing once is not sunnah, just the job will be done, right? Like for example, washing the face once, hairline to bottom of the chin, earlobe to earlobe. Once is fard, compulsory, no matter what, you have to do it once. 3 times in the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If a guy wants to be a hero and he says, I'm going to do 5 times, 7 times, you make him more clean. Anything more than the sunnah, he's doing gunah. Why? Because how dare he consider the sunnah not enough? So that's what Imam Ghazali is alluding to here. That doing something more than the sunnah amount. Right? So if something is sunnah to do, then you stick to it. Otherwise, the 4th time you wash your face, 5th time you wash your face, the water is considered wasted. You wasted that water basically. The sunnah should have been enough. And then the 5th, do not pour more water over yourself than necessary simply out of Okay, so sometimes you might have a doubt. Doubt are from shaitan. And this becomes a problem for people and they get OCD. And this is how people develop OCD as well, is when shaitan is waswasa to them. That, oh, no, I think it's not clean, I think it's not clean. But he knows fully well that I look, I put my arm under the sink, I washed it like this, it's done. Now he's like, I think a bit more. That bit more is what shaitan is whispering to him. Now he's causing him to waste water, and slowly that develops into a mental illness. So people get OCD, and they only have it from wudu. And I know people who normally they won't have it, some guys generally have it when they go to the sink and they keep washing their hands. They've got it anyway. But some people only have it for namaz. That when they do istinja, they carry doing istinja, and they've done it so much, they wipe themselves so much that they bleed in the private parts. Right? The back passage, because they wiped it so much, and because of OCD in the mind, then it causes illnesses, hence they start bleeding, then they're trying to stop the blood, and this is one of the tricks of shaitan to make you lack in your ibadat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, make you distance in your ibadat. And then the sixth one is, do not perform the ablution with water that has been sitting in the sun, or from vessels that are made of copper. And the last one is just for health reasons. One is water being warmed up through natural, on a fire, for example. Or these days we have boilers, but obviously they do the same function, they have a fire inside them. But now you have water sitting outside in the sun, and now it's heated up or boiled up because of the sun, then medically that's unhealthy for you to use that water. So that's why you mentioned, avoid using water that has been heated up through natural sunlight. So that's why he mentions here, that's what he's referring to. And broadly speaking, under that same heading, you can put anything that's considered harmful. So anything that you might consider or might be harmful to get the water in a way that might have chemicals inside or whatever it is, then you should avoid using such water. And a narration states that if a person remembers Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in his ablution, Allah purifies his whole body. And if a person does not remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, only the parts of wudu are purified. So like I mentioned, like the Imam Ghazali touched on the spiritual aspect. So if you don't remember Allah, you just do your wudu, obviously your face is clean, your hands are clean, and your feet are clean. But if you remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's like a full spiritual cleaning by the quote of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you're removing not only the sins from the limbs, but any minor sins that you've done, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give you more of a purification and purify you in a holy manner, inshallah. Inshallah, we'll continue from there. Next lesson, if you have any questions, you can write them down. Sometimes if people are shy to ask questions, just drop me a text or whatever, and then we can write them down and pass them down. Qasim to read them out, inshallah. And so, even if it's about this lesson, next lesson, if you have them, then inshallah, feel free to ask. آمين اللهم ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم اللهم إنا نسألك علما نافعا ورزقا طيبا وعملا متقبلا. Oh Allah, accept our sitting in this gathering, Ya Allah. Allah, grant us the tawfiq to do amal and whatever we have learned, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, grant us the tawfiq and to fully adopt the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, grant us the adab of the Quran and the sunnah, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, grant us love for you and your beloved Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, any shortcomings we have in our character, in our ibadat, purify us inwardly and outwardly, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, grant us life and death on the kalima tayyiba. La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah wa sallallahu ta'ala ala habibi Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in bi rahmatika ya arhamar rahimin.